axis of resistance or axis of aggression strategy has not worked. So they will this time be prepared to agree no interference in Arab affairs, no financing of paramilitary units or militias in Syria or Lebanon or Yemen or Iraq. All these issues are quite workable. The point that will become a stumbling block is whether there can be any curtailment on Iran's missile and rocket programs. This will be a difficult issue, long-range missiles. I personally think that in order to solve this issue, there will need to be some sort of guarantee issued to Iran by the United States, by Russia, by China, to say that Iran will not suffer the same fate that Mr. Gaddafi suffered in Libya when he decided to unilaterally disarm. So I think the ingredients are here. The question is, does Israel want to see a resolution to this issue along the lines I have suggested, or is it better for certain camps in the Middle East that this issue continues, so they have an enemy, they have a whipping boy, and they can drum up support behind the scenes to constantly use this for their domestic constituencies. So that's what I have to say on Iran. I think the answer a little bit.
Regarding the Iranian issue, I have been in contact with the Iranians since 1992. And I visited Iran many times. I met President Hassani, President Rouhani. I met with many high officials, the Iranian government, education, but first, I came up with, after the Iranians started creating militias in some Arab countries, which were, designed to create chaos, division, and animosity between the Sunni and the Shia. Before the revolution in Iran, we had no problems between the Shias and the Sunnis. I as a person who grew in a very conservative country, which is Saudi Arabia, we had Shia citizens in the eastern province and in Medina and in the south, in Iran. But we didn't talk about this, and we didn't recognize who is Shia and who is Sunni. In the university, I was with my colleagues. We were 11 students in the Department of Education and History. We were 11. There were two Shias, one from the south and one from the east, from Atif. And we didn't know that they were Shias, and we didn't care. But when the revolution came, they created this fitna, this issue of division. And they brought with them the history of the struggle at the time of Muawiyah and Ali and the massacre in Karbala and the killing of Hussein Ali Saddam. So these ideas came with the revolution. There is a strategy in Iran, I came to understand that lately, that they want to have influence in the Sunni countries, and that can be done by creating the militias, like what they did in Iraq, what they did in Syria, what they did in Yemen, and what they did in Lebanon. And those militias carried the banner of resistance, fighting Israel. But it is just a camouflage. They were not really sincere at that. And if you listen to the mullahs and the ayatollah and the religious authority in the Shia school of thought, they don't believe that this is Jerusalem and this is Al-Quds. They say Al-Masjid al-Aqsa, the holy mosque, is in heaven. It's not that. So how can you imagine that those who believe in such a doctrine will defend Al-Masjid al-Aqsa in Palestine? This is democracy. So the Iranian government is having its own strategy, and they use the Palestinian issue as an instrument. Let us put the Iranian aside. They don't care about what happens now between the United States and Iran, because Iran has harmed my country and harmed many Arab countries, and worked hard in the Islamic world to disseminate its thoughts and beliefs, not only in Arab countries, but in Asia and in Africa. I traveled in Africa when I was Director General of ISESCO in all the African member states, and I found that they created schools and they created agencies to disseminate their culture, to attract young people and send them to and Karbala or whatever in Iran and Iraq to study the sect and send them back to disseminate their thoughts and to divide the Muslims. So Iran is part of the problem. It's not a part of the solution. The solution is between the Israelis and the Palestinians, supported by the Arabs and the international community. And the two-state solution is the only solution. And I salute Mr. Olmert on what he said this morning. He is an experienced man. He fought the Palestinians and the Arabs. He was prime minister. He was minister in the government. And he knows the situation better than any other person in any forum. So what he said today is a solution that never we heard before. And it is what we are asking for. But let me conclude by saying, do you think that if President Sisi and King Abdullah II and Prince Mohamed and Salman go in a visit to Tel Aviv or to Washington, you remember when Prince Mohammed and Salman said that there would be no normalization? There would be no normalization with the state of Israel before the creation of a Palestinian state. You know what Netanyahu said? He said if he wants to create a Palestinian state, let him create it in Saudi Arabia. It has a big line. A person with this mentality and with this spirit, you go to talk to him, the only solution is to remove Netanyahu and the hardcore fanatics in Israel and bring people like Yehudim. That's the real solution. And Israel is full of fair-minded people, peace-loving people, and they can do it. Thank you, sir.
Malign influence and all of that. I think that a year ago it might have been possible to remove Mr. Netanyahu from power. My assessment of the situation, and I refer to Chancellor Olmert, Mr. Livni, and others here in this room, would be much better placed than me to talk about this. My assessment, though, is after the clinical way in which Netanyahu managed to degrade Hezbollah in Lebanon, managed to completely incapacitate Hamas, and managed to get rid of the Syrian leadership without precipitating a regional war, means that he is absolutely the hero, both in Israeli domestic society, but also in the international world. He is able to redeem himself. Now, if, and I have seen surveys, but perhaps our Israeli colleagues will be able to elaborate on it, I have seen surveys that say that most Israeli people are absolutely on board with the amount of force. In fact, they say even more force should have been used against Hezbollah and Hamas. Israel, whatever we might think, is a democracy in which there is at least a free and fair election of some sort. That is why the West admire, in many cases, Israel for what it is. It is a democracy, and it will be for the Israeli people to decide whether or not the time has come for Mr. Netanyahu to retire. But even if he were to retire, I am not convinced that any replacement of him will see any significant quick shift in Israeli domestic policy after the trauma of October 7. Likewise, in Iran, you have two wings. You have a right wing that is stopping Pezeshkian, Zarif, and others to make peace in the region, and then you have the Pezeshkian camp that is doing its best to make peace. Israel also has its two camps. Mr. Olmert and Ms. Libby maybe are from one camp, but it is not the camp that is today in a position of power. Whether we like it or not, this is the reality. Removing somebody is not easy, it's not possible even by the United States.
Thank you, Mr. Amersi. In the back of my mind, by the way, one of the notes I took was Khamenei succession question mark. We can get to that. Maybe if we have time, maybe we can get to that later on. But we have a question from Prime Minister Hollande. Also, immediately after the Prime Minister, the gentleman to your right had his hand up. So I don't want to prejudice either of you. But well, you're right side by side. So why don't we take more questions from over there?
First of all, I don't want to ask. I want to make a comment. All right?
We have some of that, so no worries.
Every now and then it happens, but not with Mr. Musa. He's very busy. I want to say...
Would you accept it as restitution if a fair balancing act?
So this is the list of all the mistakes that he has committed in the lifelong activities. I know that there is an urban legend that in the day that Mohamed will be released from jail, he is a ready-made leader for the Palestinians. This is an urban legend. When I was Prime Minister, I permitted many political Israelis to meet with him. Okay? Because I wanted to hear what he has to say. I was not able to meet with him. He was convicted for 5 murder cases. However, this is a legend. On the day that Israel will release, this is the only way that he will have to protect his reputation for not making a collusion with Israel, to release him for selling the interest of the Palestinians for the Israelis. So don't rely on him. Rather, there are many, I think, I've met, there are many Palestinians who are very worthy potential leaders. And they should rise to this position. I don't want to say anything against the chairman, the president. I was friendly with him, I worked with him, I proposed to him a comprehensive solution that may have ended everything and changed history, and he didn't have the leadership or the guts to sign it for whatever reason, doesn't matter. The fact is that he didn't sign it. But I think the time has come for the Palestinians to think, what are they looking for towards the future, and who can be the leader? And while I said what I said about Mohamed, I don't want to propose or to drop any name, because I think it would be patronizing and arrogant for an Israeli to pick up the one that should lead the enemy side. No, it is their responsibility, and it is incumbent upon them, and I hope that they will have the strength and the courage and the vision and the inspiration and the broad mind to elect someone that will have enough power within the community and enough strength and courage to move forward towards those amongst us who are anxious to find a partner. I found one, by the way. I found one. You all know his name, Nasser Kitwa, which is a remarkable person. I never knew him before, by the way. I never met him. Never. I negotiated with him by coincidence. Tom Friedman interviewed both of us for YouTube. And it was an hour-long interview in which he and me, concurrently, found out that we speak alike. So we started to talk on the Zoom meetings. And we signed the statement on the 17th of July before we ever met. And surprisingly, and fortunately, when we met, we became friends. Which sometimes can be the opposite. But when we met and we started to go around Europe and the Arab countries, we found out that we actually like
If you continue that way, you will be removed from the list.
I was removed from Israel long ago, don't worry. But now I want to say something which is equally important in response to what you said. For the last 2 years, and particularly after October 7th, every week there are polls conducted in Israel. And as you say, this is within the framework of democracy and free speech and whatever. And in every single poll that was run in Israel for the last year and a half after October 7th, the government and the coalition parties have no more than 40% of the electorate. Okay? So number one, the perception that Bibi is irremovable, he doesn't believe in it, and he knows why. There is a good chance. I don't want to go now into all these questions that people ask all the time. Who is going to be the one that will replace him? Gans, Eisenhower, Lapid, Bennett. I don't know to say, and I don't want to say. You know, this is a serious issue. One thing I know, that the majority of the Israelis are now, number one, they are in favor of ending the war now and pulling out from Gaza in order to bring the hostages in the context of releasing Palestinian prisoners and in pulling out from Gaza and everything. That's number one. Number two, I want to say one thing about the Palestinian state. I know most people think that this is very unpopular and so on. It has not been very popular after the 7th of October. But we are a year and a half after the 7th of October. And things are changing. And again, in all the polls that are run, not by the commercial political firms, but by the Hebrew University, the pattern with regard to Palestinian state is following. And it's very important that all of you guys will understand it. 1/3 of the population consistently, for a long time, is in favor of a Palestinian state. Okay, that's number one. 1/3 is not in favor of a Palestinian state, but when asked and researched and deeply, they are prepared to tolerate a political solution within the framework of a two-state solution. 1/3 is against it. So to assume that all of the Israelis are against it, that the public opinion of Israel has changed dramatically and moved into the extreme right, all of these are legends and exaggerations and some kind of an arrogance. The performance of the right-wing, full right-wing government of the state of Israel is considered by the majority of the Israelis to be a total failure. And there is an opening to a change. And finally, in all of the polls, when asked, more than 60% of the Israelis consistently say that they don't trust Netanyahu because they think that he prefers, or prioritizes, if you want, his personal survivability interest over the national interest of the state of Israel. I wish that it will be accomplished. I mean, it will come out to be the reality sooner than later. But I definitely not lose hope, and I think that Israel is moving perhaps more rapidly than most people see from the outside into a change, and this change will help establish the process that I'm fighting for and campaigning for. Thank you.
So, thank you. You're right, Mr. Prime Minister, the gentleman. Would you like to speak up just a little bit? Okay.
Am I audible now? Hello, Tunisia. I'm a young leader who works with the UAE public sector. I resonate completely with the Prime Minister's remarks about Palestine needing to choose its destiny, and I'd actually like to latch on to a remark that was made on stage right before the Prime Minister spoke about how leverage is required in discussions with Israel. Mr. Amersi made that remark. And he talked about how we need to have bargaining power in discussions with Israel. I'd like to highlight a very interesting fact to everyone present here. Despite great sympathy within the MENA region for the cause of the Palestine people, for the destiny of the Palestine people, it's interesting to note that economic ties between MENA countries and Israel have not changed. To quote some numbers, in the UAE, for example, bilateral trade between Israel and the UAE grew from 2.9 billion, USD 2.9 billion in 2023 to 3.4 billion in 2024. In Jordan, there was a 1% drop in bilateral trade between the same time period. And interestingly, in Egypt, bilateral trade grew by 30% between these countries. So to your remark about Mr. Amersi, about the need for leverage in discussions with Israel. Do you think economic ties, growing economic ties between Israel and MENA countries, could be that leverage to get Palestine, as the Prime Minister said, to choose its destiny?
Why don't you go ahead, and I also want Mr. Altwaijri to pick up this one, because when it comes to economic relations, you know, you can't actually have that conversation with them. Did you say you were from the UAE, sir?
I work for the UAE public sector.
You work for the public sector in the UAE. Obviously, Israel has established that, and there was a lot of talk before October 7th that Saudi Arabia would follow suit. Do you think that establishing economic relations without, perhaps, full political relations, the way the United States and China did after President Nixon's visit, which then led to diplomatic relations, do you see some version of that? Perhaps in a way that might actually foster some understanding over which a viable, sustainable Palestinian state could be built, Dr. Altwaijri?
No, they said and announced officially by the foreign ministry of the highest authorities. Saudi Arabia is not going to normalize the relations with Israel before the creation of the state of Palestine on the borders of 1967. It has been announced. And the last meeting of the Arab Summit issued this and confirmed. So, economic relations, bilateral relations, these are games that will never solve the problem. Look what happened between Israel and Egypt, Israel and Jordan, and now lately Israel and the United Arab Emirates. It's just, nonsense to me. The genuine solution is to create a Palestinian state, and then there will be a massive relations, economic, political, cultural, social, human, and the region will live in peace, and there will be no wars, no terrorism, nothing. But don't believe or think for a moment that exchanging goods and visits and this or that will solve the problem. This is just heresy. The only solution, as Mr. Mohamed said, is to have two states, with East Jerusalem as a capital, and on the borders of 1967, with certain changes here and there, but not very major changes, small changes. And this is the last, everlasting, and the fair and more livable solution for the problem. Otherwise, the new coming generation will inherit this animosity, will inherit this grudging, and they will keep fighting. And the whole region will be in turmoil and fighting and animosity and hatred. We don't want that to last like that. We don't want our coming generation to live what we have lived. It's not human, and it is not just for them. Let us find a solution that will close the chapter. And everybody now, I think, is in conformity, agreeing that there should be a two-state solution. Why should we deprive the Palestinians from their right to exist and to live decently like other nations? To have a nation for themselves, and to have normalization with their neighbors, not only the Arab countries, but also the close neighbor is the state of Israel. So, let's put aside all these hallucinations and dreams. They will never bring peace. The everlasting peace will come when we see a viable, independent Palestinian state established, and then peace will come, and then normalization and exchange of all relations will come afterwards. That's the only solution.
Thank you very much. And then in the next round, we'll come to you. Sir, the two gentlemen who want to go hand their hand. Only, 1 minute perhaps, and then I'll go for 30 minutes. Please.
No, I have a question. I had the chance of meeting the Palestinian leadership in Ramallah several times, as well as Gaza, and I was struck by the weakness. And I was struck by the weakness and lack of credibility. At the same time, as I met so many Palestinians who are very, very capable and who could take leadership position. So how can we explain that we have such weak leadership of the Palestinians?
My name is Frank O'Donnell. I'm Irish.
Mark, could you speak up, get the mic close?
Yeah, my name is Frank O'Donnell. I'm Irish. And the previous panel, Susan Elliott, the issue of on the Middle East, made reference to the Good Friday Agreement and how we managed to achieve peace. And I don't want to build some change in Israel, political space for change in Israel, and also advance the Abraham Accords beyond by actually dealing with the two-state solution in the following way. I actually believe, and I wrote about this a few months ago, that the buck stops in the White House, and that President Trump, who is so keenly interested in earning a Nobel Peace Prize, the lowest hanging fruit is probably not Ukraine and Russia at this point in time, but simply lifting the American veto on Palestine's admission into the UN. 143 member states are already in favor, but the Security Council has to agree. And if the Americans could agree, I think it would have a major impact on opening up political space in Israel, to put it diplomatically, and also, the Arab world, I think, with the Arab Peace Initiative going back to 2002 and its subsequent deliberations, I believe that you would have a change and a greater positivity in the Arab world towards Israel and acceptability. That again opens up the Abraham Accords to the economic prospects of greater regional integration in economic terms. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Council for Human Rights, and naturally we have to look at the people of Palestine, how to bring them back to normalcy after all the scars that they've been through. Now we can hear only what the Israelis think. What about the Palestinians? What about those who are outside wanting to come inside? If the decision to establish a Palestinian state, very important is that how the international community, how the United Nations, how Middle States, how whoever can help the Palestinian people start a normal life after they have been forcibly evicted, they have been victims of all kinds of abuse. I don't want to say who to blame, but this is a fact. How we can bring them back to normalcy, whereby they can elect freely without manipulation by Hezbollah or Hamas or whatever, to have a normal, vibrant, sustainable state with full membership in the United Nations. And the Security Council has to rise to the occasion and help in this peace building and empowering real, everyday Palestinians to take part in a democratic state.
Thank you so much. That's a brilliant point. As someone who worked in Iraqi Kurdistan for 8 years, people who have experienced generational trauma, and it's a 50-year project. All of the things we've discussed so far can be fixed in 15, 20 years. Generational trauma is something else. Thank you so much for pointing that out.
Thank you. My name is Farida Al-Adi. I'm a human rights activist. I'm from Libya. And I'm sorry that I have to repeat myself, that when I was 7 years old, I was marching in the streets for the rights of the Palestinian and the Algerian. And now I'm 77, so after 70 years, we are still struggling with this never-ending war. A war that I'm not going to tell now who's right, who's wrong, because those of you, unfortunately, we need to know the history of the Jews in the Arab countries. I always said that I had a Jewish friend when I was 7 years old who was my friend. They were living in Libya. We have lots of Jews living in many Arab countries. And it's a pity that children, the 40,000 children and women and elders who have been slaughtered in the last 500 days, the injustices that's going on. And then we have to listen to the people, not to the politician, not to the intellectual, not to the governments for sure, because many of the Arab governments, they are looking after their own interests. Nobody's looking seriously to the interests of the Palestinian elderly and children and women who are dying of hunger, who are dying of so many illnesses, who have been bombarded. We are going to walk to the people in the Arab world. If you listen to the people in the Arab world, are very angry and are they lost hope. And the Palestinians are saying, even if they kill all of us, we will never ever leave Gaza. Let Trump and his troops and the Americans and the Europeans have been contributing to the death of my people and to the death of the Arabs and to the death of the Palestinians. So the dreaming and the camouflage and the tokenism is not going to lead us anywhere. Now we have this Arab initiative. I changed. I used to be in a different camp. I used to say, no, we have to continue this struggle, even if it will take us 200 years. Now, we are not the ones who decide. The Palestinians who are last night, I have been crying for a year, for more than a year, not sleeping. My children are living in Lebanon. I was hearing the bombing and the killing. And I'm very scared from the wave of hate that we are giving to our children. We are not giving love. We are not giving good education. We are not giving critical thinking. We are not giving any of this. So now, our problem, we as people, what can we say, do? I am very humble. I hope that Israelis who are believers in peace at least take the ban off the humanitarian support, the food, the medication. Before we put our dreams of how to solve this problem has been going on for 70, 75 years. It's not going to be easy how to be solved. There are many initiatives, there are many good people, there are many, and at this point, I want to salute and to raise my hat to all the peace-loving people. Yesterday, the Jews went and took over the Trump building. Jews, freedom lovers, peace lovers, students, American. I live in America. I love the people. The people are the ones who are going to give the solution, not the politician, not the intellectual, not the political parties, not the business people, because these are all looking after their own innocence. But I am, as a woman, if I will see an innocent young Israeli being killed, I will feel bad, because we are a human. So, are we still human? I don't know. If you see what we have been seeing, if you see the orphanage, the small children that lost their parents, their fathers, their mothers, how they're going to grow up. They want to revenge. They want to take their life back. So that region, only God knows. I'm going to die without seeing any of my dreams coming true, neither in the democracy and fighting the dictatorship of our rulers that we have been living for many years, nor the solution to the Palestinian problem.
I'm terribly sorry. We have another request from over there. Who's got the mic? Do you have the mic? You don't have to go to the main event after this. In fact, if possible, we'll make ourselves available. But I also have a promise to keep to the good people at the Nizami Ganjari. Ms. Sadr, please, go ahead.
I question all the time about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict in the future. I grew up to what happened during the Intifada. I grew up to this feeling of anger, at least. So what I want to highlight here is that it's not just the Arab states. It's what has been happening all across the world in the universities, where youth were rebelling, where youth were seeing the amount of crimes that the Israeli side has been committing, and the demolishing of the international laws widely claimed and has been followed by millions of people around the world. This has been a genocide. It was extremely criminal. I was downstairs during the Middle East session, during the Path to Peace, very much amazed. Why were the claps there when it's just a talk? The two-state solution has been proposed as a solution for tens of years, but what the practice is completely different on ground. The practice is that the sentence didn't happen in vacuum. It was the annexation, it was the violations that has been targeting the civilians. Gaza is completely demolished. So the question is now, what's after? What's after? The Egyptians has put on the table a very important proposal for the reconstruction. If the world is thinking of a healing process, if we're true about the peace path, this should have been considered on a very serious note from all the states. But there is a huge thing between the talk and the walk all the time. Thank you.
They are fasting in an atmosphere of thirst, hunger, and freezing. Add to that fear and no homes. It's a demolished region. The whole area is demolished. There is no one single house or apartment that can host or house these people. So this is an immediate solution. Nobody is talking about this. The borders are closed. The Israeli government, the Netanyahu government, threatens to cut electricity, water, and medicine. Medicine to whom? I mean, there are no hospitals. The hospitals have been demolished. The doctors have been killed. The religious authority have been murdered. More than 320 imams and religious leaders in Gaza were killed. And some of them are now captured. And they are imprisoned in Israel. And the hospitals are completely demolished. The U.S. the humanitarian agencies are prevented from going there to aid these cornered and besieged people who are in a very, very harsh and miserable situation. So let's go to them humanitarianly now. Save them before they die. But the talking is now we will expel them and rebuild them. To expel them to where? Egypt will not take them, Jordan will not take them, no Arab country will take them. Will you send them to Mars? I mean, it's hilarious to think in such a way. It's inhuman to think in such a way. Let's save these souls. 2 million and some hundreds of thousands of innocent people living in the worst conditions. Let's save them.
First of all, I have met with Nasser Kidwa. Kidwa has a lot of support in the Palestinian Authority, but hardly any support in Hamas. So he is not going to be able to unite the two Palestinian factions. There is also Majid Faraj, who is the head of Palestinian intelligence. He has more possibility to unite the Palestinians so that they can speak with one voice. But I would say that my preference would still be Barghouti, because I believe that somebody that has been in Israeli prisons for such a long time will develop leadership skills, will develop statesmanship skills, because he will know it's now or never. He'll be able to lead PA for sure, and he will also be able to have the legitimacy to lead Hamas, because he has suffered for more than 20 years. The second point I would make is that I would agree with Prime Minister Olmert that Netanyahu in the first year of the conflict was a very weakened person, but after surgically dealing with Hezbollah, Hamas, Assad, and hitting Iran so successfully without precipitating a war, he is a hero. To replace him is an illusion. It will not happen so quickly, it will not happen so easily. We talk about leverage. With all due respect, the economic point is an absolute fallacy, because this will play into Israeli hands, where Israel wants the Gulf money, and in return it will supply some technology, some defense, and this gravy train will continue without ever finding a resolution to the Palestinian conflict. If the Arab states were really serious of exercising leverage, then Jordan and Egypt should say, we suspend our participation in Camp David. Yes. The Abraham Accords participants should say, we suspend, not terminate, we suspend our participation in Abraham Accords, so that Israel can see that there is a unity, a coalescing of Arab interests. If this is not going to happen, then what has happened, and this is me talking from the outside, without the benefit of Mr. Netanyahu's ideology, he has seen that the support from Jordan and Egypt is in the bag. We don't really have to work hard to continue getting their support. It's much better for us now to get support of the rich GCC states, because that's where the money and that's where the power in the Trump White House resides. So this is the question about leverage. On the Nobel Prize, good point, but I have had discussions with the Norwegians and the Swedes. They have said that they will never, ever give a Nobel Peace Prize now to a sitting president. So Trump can continue thinking about this, that will not happen.
Well, that was the reason. Thank you so much, Mr. Amersi. Folks, with that,
Just a minute. You have to go and work in Israel. There are people that can support you. That is the first point. The second minute is, or if there is a consensus that Hamas has to leave the scene, now Netanyahu and Smotrich and the rest, they have to leave the scene too.
Exactly.
It's not only us.
Exactly.
But I've been speaking
Fair enough, okay.
consistently for the last few years. What I say here is what I say in Israel. And what I say in Israel, when I write, I say, I meet these people, I talk to people, I talk in the media, I write articles, I do everything. What I say here is what I say inside Israel. Okay? But no, you can't hear it, because unfortunately you don't have time to listen to what we say in Israel. You have to fight with your friends in the Arab world. So you argue with them. But let me tell you this. I wish that there will be more partners from the Palestinian side other than Nasser Kidwa. And finally, 3 weeks ago, I and Nasser Kidwa organized a conference in Larnaca, Cyprus, and there were 50 Palestinians from the territories. We had financed their trip, they didn't have to pay anything. We organized the contributions in order to help them, and 50 Israelis. And there were 100 people sitting for 3 days and talking, and this is part of the effort. So what I need now, I need more partners from the Palestinian side. We in Israel speak up. Thank you.
From Gaza, there is no prospect of Arab states giving money for this plan.